Okay, so last week we started talking about the 3 weeks. This week we're going to be talking about the 9 days, and it's especially fortuitous as it is not yet the 9 days. So we have some time to prepare and to anticipate what it is that we have to do over the course of the 9 days. So Chazal tell us it's actually a Gemara that says that when one enters into the month of Av. Okay, excuse me. When one enters into the month of Av, one should minimize their simcha. They should minimize their happiness, which we understand to mean that over the course of the month of Av, we intensify our morning rituals, our morning behavior, the behavior that we partake in that demonstrates that we're not happy at this time. It is emphasized over the course of these 9 days. What are the sorts of things that are forbidden during the 9 days? Well, there are four primary things, we'll call them. One is, certain kinds of foods. We don't consume meat, nor do we consume wine. Number two, we don't bathe or shower for pleasurable purposes or for pleasurable reasons. Three, we don't make or purchase new clothing. And number four, we don't wash or wear freshly washed clothing. These are all particular rituals of mourning that are associated with Avelus, like, when the person goes through the process of Jewish ritual mourning, that we employ with regards to this time of year to show how despondent and unhappy we are over the destruction of the temple, over the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, in general, we have to walk with a little bit of reverence, which means to say that even though certain things might be permitted according to the letter of the law, if they're not in the spirit of the 9 days, then they probably should be avoided nonetheless. Just because something might be permitted, if it is something that provides an incredible amount of joy, celebration, then it probably should not be done over the course of the 9 days. And it's always for each individual, there's going to be a different metric. Some things are really celebratory for some people, but not necessarily the most exciting time for others. The 9 days are not a time for frivolity and excessive simcha. And we're expected to maintain a bit of solemnity over this period of time. Not that we're going to be, Debbie Downers the entire period over the course of the entire 9 days. That's not expected, and it's not reasonable. But we should definitely moderate our behavior to reflect the theme of this time. So when do these 9 days start? So according to Ashkenazi custom, according to Ashkenazi practice, the minhag is that we start on Rosh Chodesh Av, which means at sundown, Rosh Chodesh Av, that's when these rituals or these practices of mourning come into effect. Now, some people say Shkia, and that's the generally accepted practice. If you find yourself in a situation of duress, then you can start at Seisa Kochavim, which is about 50, 60, 70 minutes later, depending on where you are, depending on how long the day is. When one has reason to be lenient, one can, but in general we try to maintain the shkia as the time for when these rituals of mourning come into play. There is in this year an additional complexity because the beginning of the 9 days, Rosh Chodesh, also happens to be Shabbos. And as we're going to see, none of the practices, none of the rituals of mourning that are observed over the course of the 9 days are at play on Shabbos. On Shabbos. So therefore, even though the 9 days begins, on the first of Av, obviously, this year, because the first of Av is Shabbos, we actually do not observe, we do not begin the rituals of mourning until after Shabbos has concluded. So that will be Saturday night. All right. Now, let's start talking about the specific things that we're not allowed to do over the course of the 9 days. The first that we mentioned was, not having weddings or other kinds of festive meals. Now, our minhag is to not celebrate a wedding from Tisha B'Av, from the beginning of Av, from Rosh Chodesh Av, until until Tisha B'Av itself. And even then, the day after Tisha B'Av is considered to be an extension of Tisha B'Av for many of these practices. So we do not get married over the course of this entire time. Now, if you were to take a look at some other communities, like some Sephardim, for example, they don't start their rituals of mourning on Rosh Chodesh Av. Rather, they begin their rituals of mourning from the week that in which Tisha B'Av falls out, from the beginning of that week. So in our case, for example, we have Tisha B'Av falling out on a Sunday. um, People from those communities would not be observing the rituals of mourning at all because they only observe the rituals of mourning during the week in which Tisha B'Av falls. Since Tisha B'Av falls out on a Sunday, many of these 9 days practices that we have would not be observed would be observed by them. And we do say that, that under some circumstances, we will be lenient as well. In general, we try not to be, but there are circumstances, there are situations in which one can be lenient, and we try to sort of attach leniencies together to say if we have a reason to be lenient, we'll try to make it happen during the week that precedes Tisha B'Av, as opposed to the week of Tisha B'Av, even if it falls out in the 9 days. Now, also included in this practice, and as I said before, we're not getting married from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. That's Ashkenazi practice, but that is more of a minhag. When it comes to the actual halacha, it becomes much more stringent and much more serious from Rosh Chodesh Av. Now, besides festive meals being forbidden or being not in keeping with the theme of the time, um, it's not just about weddings. Anytime that we throw a great big party, we're perhaps running afoul of the theme of the 9 days. So not only would we say that are we prohibited from having a big festive meal to celebrate a wedding, but celebrating a graduation also would probably not be an appropriate thing to do. Now, the question that people very often ask is about a vort or an engagement party when we're announcing an engagement. Now, according to most opinions, according to most halachic authorities, one is allowed one is allowed to have a vort during the 9 days. You are allowed to announce an engagement during the 9 days. And even if people come to your home to celebrate and to say Mazel Tov, as long as you're not serving a meal, it's fine. The prohibition here is mostly about a celebration. It's not a celebration without there being a party, and there's no party without food. So in order for it to be considered a celebration, there has to be an actual sit-down meal. If you're simply just putting out like some cake and some soda, that's not really considered to be a celebratory meal, and therefore you don't run afoul of this prohibition. And as such, an engagement party where you're just inviting people over to say Mazel Tov, and they're just they're just having a piece of cake and drinking and maybe saying a l'chaim, having a cup of soda, that would be fine. That does not run afoul of these prohibitions. All right, so that covers weddings and other kinds of festive meals. Um, let's talk about meat and wine. We said a moment ago that meat and wine are prohibited over the course of the 9 days. Now, meat and wine generally, the reason why one does not consume them, when they're in mourning, is because these are two food items that are viewed as, as livening up any affair. It's a much more significant event when meat is being served, and it's a much happier event when wine is being served. So you might easily assume that, well, that being the case, then that's also what's at play here during the 9 days. The reason why we don't have meat and we don't have wine is because these are sad times, and we don't do things that will make us glad. Um, that's not entirely correct. Well, that's definitely a theme, and that's definitely an appropriate way to think about meat and wine. The reason why we don't consume meat and wine specifically during the 9 days, has to do with the destruction of the temple itself. With the destruction of the temple, sacrifices ceased. And the two main forms of sacrifices that were offered in the temple were the slaughter of animals being parts of the animal, or the entire animal being burnt on the altar, or B, wine libations that would be poured next to the altar. Because the temple was destroyed and we can no longer offer animal sacrifices or apply wine libations, Therefore, we don't consume meat and we don't drink wine to highlight what it is that we're not able to do with these items. If we can't offer them in the temple, then we're not going to eat them ourselves over the course of this day. Then it's very easy to ask the logical following question. Well, what kind of animals were offered on the altar? Well, it would have only been cows, goats, sheep, and specifically turtle doves. What was chicken offered on the altar? How about venison? Was venison offered on the altar? No. And also likewise, you know, no, that's not a good. We'll walk away from that. But anyways, so you might argue, okay, well then only the sacrificial animals should not be eaten during the course of this time, and other kinds of meat like chicken and like venison that and duck that should be okay, that should be acceptable. And the answer is that when we take a look at how um, when we take a look at how how people think of meat, people don't distinguish between different kinds of meat, right? We wait 3 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, however long a person waits after they have meat before they have dairy. They don't distinguish between different kinds of meat because in our mind, we associate all meat with meat. We don't really distinguish. We don't create different kinds of categories of meat, at least when it comes to animals that aren't fish. For some reason, we think of fish as being completely different. But that being said, because in our how because as a part of our perception, we view all animal stuff as being fleshig. We don't create any kind of distinction when it comes to the 9 days. Despite it being a sacrifice related prohibition, we don't make any kind of exceptions for different kinds of meat. Meat is meat. We don't eat meat. And it's a similar story with regards to grape juice. You might be able to argue, you might try to argue, well, in the temple, we poured wine libations. You couldn't use grape juice on the altar. And so maybe we should be allowed to drink grape juice during the course of the 9 days. And the answer is that just as chicken is prohibited, so too grape juice is prohibited because in our, and just as as we go about our day and as we do our thing, we say Havdalah on grape juice. We say Kiddush on grape juice. We use grape juice as wine. So despite the fact that technically it couldn't have been offered on the altar, just like chicken couldn't be offered on the altar, since in terms of our headspace, we view them as the same, we treat them the same, and as such, chicken and grape juice are also forbidden during these 9 days. Well, however, there is a light side, there is an upside to all of this. Since we're attaching and associating everything with what was offered in the temple and what we associate with what was offered in the temple, was beer ever offered in the temple? Was scotch or whiskey ever offered in the temple? No. And as a result, over the course of these 9 days, beer and other hard liquor are still consumable to the exception of port. If you come to my house, you'll see that I do buy port. I do like port. I do serve port. It's what I drink between fish and meat. Often I say a special brach on it, as I mentioned last week. But I could not drink that during the course of the 9 days, if it's not Shabbos, anyways. But I would be able to have rum. I would be able to have scotch. I would be able to have vodka. Those things would be acceptable. Now, what's that? That's a good question. Brandy, I think we treat like wine in this regard. Even though it has been distilled, it still has a bit of a wine-like flavor to it. It's not like a vodka where it's like completely been stripped away. So I think it would still be considered a wine.
Rabbi,
Yes.
this is Jennifer. I didn't quite catch that. Are we allowed to have wine on Shabbos or no?
Yes, on Shabbos you are. We're gonna get to that soon. We haven't discussed Shabbos yet, but I did say that in general, all of the 9 day prohibitions are not in effect on Shabbos.
Okay, thank you. I was late joining.
Not at all. We'll get to it soon. Okay. Now, what about a meat dish that doesn't have any meat in it? What about like chicken soup? Well, it makes you can't have it with milk, right? It's still fleshig. It would still make you fleshig if you ate it. We still say that it's not prohibited. We still say that it is prohibited. We do not eat it during the 9 days. However, that does not apply to food that was cooked in a fleshig pot. So if you boil your potatoes in your chicken soup pot, if there's no chicken soup in it, your potatoes are fine and you can eat it. Um, you know, we don't eat meat and fish together. That's a pretty universal Jewish custom. Um, in my wife's school in Beis Yaakov, they were taught that they could not even have fish that was cooked in a meat pot. And I remember encountering this and my wife and being getting very confused and showing my wife all various different sources that say that there's no problem with cooking fish in a meat pot. So my wife, I guess, started cooking fish in a meat pot, but then she was having a cut chatting with her sister-in-law, Chani. You might remember she's lived here in Calgary, and Chani started was very taken aback because she also learned in school that you do not eat fish cooked in a meat pot. So she called her Rav, and her Rav said, like, didn't understand. Are you trying to trick me? Are you trying to pull one over on me? Like, I don't understand what you're asking. Of course it's not a problem. Of course you can, there's no issue. So yeah, it's the same thing over here. You are allowed to consume your potatoes even if they have been boiled in a meat pot, even during the 9 days. As you said before, there are some exceptions to this. If a person needs to eat meat for health reasons or Shabbos, there are exceptions, and we do allow for the consumption of meat under those in those situations. What about children? Are children obligated to also refrain from eating meat? So the accepted minhag, the accepted practice and custom is to not feed children of any age meat during the 9 days. Ramosha Feinstein, however, was of the opinion that children until age 6 can consume meat. Now, there are some exceptions to this. One exception being, if a child needs to eat it for health reasons, obviously they'd be allowed to do it. Even adults can eat meat for health reasons. Another concern has to do with children who are incredibly fastidiously picky eaters. Um, Sorry, there's somebody at the door. Um, some kids are fastidiously picky eaters. Like the only thing they eat are chicken nuggets. I've met many such children. In fact, I might have had a few myself who refuse to eat anything other than chicken nuggets. For children who only eat chicken nuggets, we say, yeah, if they're not going to eat enough healthy food and that's all they're going to eat, then they're allowed to consume meat during the 9 days. Now, also some halachic authorities are of the opinion that Shabbos leftovers can also be served to children under age 6. Even though normally we don't serve children meat during the 9 days, we would be allowed to serve Shabbos leftovers because otherwise the Shabbos leftovers often would go to waste, and it's better that they be consumed. It's better that they be eaten and not be tossed. All right. Now, getting back to Shabbos and Havdalah, what do we do? If we said that we don't eat meat and we don't drink wine, what about Shabbos? What about Havdalah? Well, let's take a step back first. Let's talk about children again for a moment. Um, Calgary because of its position often starts Shabbos quite late. These days, we're starting Shabbos at 7:30. If we're starting Shabbos at 7:30, often that means that very small children cannot stay up late to join the family for the Shabbos meal because especially if somebody's going to shul, they're not coming home until 8:30, 9 o'clock. We're not starting until very late in the evening. So often what families will do Often, what families will do is serve their children Shabbos food before Shabbos, so that the children don't feel so bad about missing the Shabbos meal, especially if there's some special food being prepared and they're very excited about it. They want to partake. They want to enjoy. If one normally feeds their children a Shabbos Su'uda, Shabbos meal before a Shabbos begins, normally during the rest of the year, then they can continue to do so during the 9 days as well. Um, also, the same thing is true for us who make an early Shabbos. Yes, despite the fact that Shabbos has not yet begun in terms of when sunset takes place, still we've accepted Shabbos early, and with the early acceptance of Shabbos, all the rules of Shabbos come into play, including the permission to eat meat and have wine, even though it's in the middle of the 9 days. What about a malava malka? The meal that you eat after Shabbos has concluded. Even if a person has the custom of eating meat, especially Shabbos leftovers, after Shabbos, still during the 9 days, one may not eat meat during that time. During the 9 days, one may not have a meat malava malka. And as we said a moment ago, leftovers just in general are not permitted, despite the fact that yes, things might go bad and they might they might turn, they won't last. You can't always freeze your Shabbos leftovers. Regretfully, they might have to be disposed of if they turn. All right, now let's talk about Havdalah. It is permissible to drink wine if it is a mitzvah to do so, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch is of the opinion that one may drink Havdalah wine even though Havdalah is being drunk after Shabbos has concluded. The Ramah, however, writes that the custom of Ashkenazim is to give wine to a child, excuse me, a child to drink. If one always uses wine for Havdalah, they should maintain that custom during the 9 days and preferably give it to a child if there is a child available. Another option, and this is the option that I make use of, is the use of what's called Chamar Medina, other alcoholic beverages, which are things like cider, something like a mead, something like beer, and even if a person is so inclined, hard liquor as well can also be used. Havdalah can be sent on these things. That's what I do, and I do think that that is the prevalent and widely observed practice is to use something like beer for Havdalah during the 9 days. If one does not have beer, they should say Havdalah and give it to a child. If there's no child available, then you give it to, then you just drink it yourself, and that's because what else can you do? You're doing it for the purpose of a mitzvah, and that is considered acceptable. Um, all right. Um, another exception to the consumption of meat are what's called a sudas mitzvah. It's a meal that's served on the occasion of a mitzvah. So, for example, if a person is making a bris, if a person is making a pidyon haben, if a person is making a siyum, at those times, meat and wine are permitted. Somebody may drink wine and can and may consume meat during the 9 days, as the purpose of the gathering is a mitzvah celebration, and as such, as it's a mitzvah celebration, the consumption of these food items is acceptable, is allowed. Remember, a couple years back, we made a bas mitzvah here in Calgary. It was an oversight. The bas mitzvah party was scheduled for a for on a day that was the 9 days, and the policy of the BCK, which then was inherited by the ABK, was to not serve meat at such an event, which means that they refused to provide hashgacha for the event until I told them, I'm making a siyum. I prepared a tractate of Talmud just so that it could be used for this occasion at this event. And Rabbi Matisoff called the head office, and the head office said, "If there's going to be a CM fine, like there's nothing we can do. We can't stop it." So we did in fact have the bas mitzvah celebration during the 9 days because we turned the party, which is not inherently a mitzvah celebration, into a mitzvah celebration by celebrating a siyum. All right, now that's number two. So we spoke about the consumption of alcohol and not alcohol, but drinking wine and having meat. We we spoke about what else we spoke about celebratory celebrations like having a wedding or other kinds of parties. We're now going to talk about the third practice of mourning associated with the 9 days, and that is bathing and showering. Now, bathing and showering for a pleasurable purpose is not allowed during the 9 days. What is considered to be pleasurable is a very complicated discussion, and with many, many different halachic authorities who weigh in on this. We're going to put that to the side for now, what's considered to be pleasure, and we're just going to take for granted that showering is not allowed. But we'll talk a little. We'll come back to this in a moment. While we're saying that one should not shower and bathe for pleasure, one is allowed to wash their hands and wash their face. However, preferably it should be done in cold water. Swimming is not permissible because swimming is considered to be bathing for pleasure. You're definitely not washing yourself. Like, you're not saying, oh, I'm so dirty. I'm just going to go to the bath. I'm going to go to the swimming pool to clean yourself off so that I can just, you're going to the swimming pool to play. You're going to the swimming pool to relax. You're going to the swimming pool to enjoy yourself. And you're immersing yourself in water as you do. That's bathing for pleasure. And as such, we say that that swimming is not allowed during the 9 days. If you find yourself as a lifeguard, however, you are allowed to be in the swimming pool because for you, even though you are you might enjoy your time in the swimming pool, you're not there because you're there to party or you're there to go to swim. You're there to be the lifeguard to earn a living. You're there to earn some money. You're not swimming for pleasure. You are swimming for parnasa, which is a different equation. And we say, yeah, you are allowed during the 9 days to continue to act as a lifeguard and even sort of be a lifeguard within the swimming pool itself. Um, Children who are less than the age of chinuch, which is less than 6 years old, for them swimming is permissible. However, it still should be avoided whenever possible. So bathing for pleasure is forbidden, but bathing for cleanliness is permitted. We have to sort of qualify what exactly does it mean to bathe for cleanliness. One is allowed to shower or bathe if they're dirty, meaning they got schmutz on them, if they've perspired, but in general, if they're bathing because they're uncomfortable, just because, I bathe every day and I just feel off if I don't bathe, I feel off if I don't take a shower, then that can fall under the sort of the moniker or the classification of bathing for pleasure. Um, when we talk about bathing, and I've been using shower and bathing interchangeably, um, according to many opinions, yes, you cannot shower and you cannot get into a bath during the 9 days. There are, however, halachic opinions, and this is the most widely accepted practice, is that it's only getting into a bathtub that constitutes a problem. Getting into a shower is not an issue at all. And as such, taking a shower is not prohibited over the course of the 9 days. That does seem to be the most broadly accepted and practiced halachic opinion. When you're taking a shower, it's very utilitarian. You don't sit and relax in the shower. So you might find the shower relaxing, but it's not like a bubble bath where you can just sort of sit back and just sort of chill. You kind of get in the shower, you do your business, and you leave. You don't hang out there the way you would in a bathtub. And so, therefore, it's viewed as being qualitatively different, and many halachic authorities do allow. There are, however, other halakhic authorities who say that no, a shower is still perhaps problematic. So but you can make a shower more halakhically palatable. And this is what I do. I take a shower where I only turn on the hot water just enough so that it's not biting cold. It's a cool shower. It's not a hot shower. There's no steam being generated. It's not a hot shower. So the showers I take during the 9 days are cool. There's no steam. There's just enough hot water to take the bite out of the cold. I also wash individual parts of the body, as opposed to getting in my entirety. I'll just do I'll part a limb at a time essentially, and that is considered to what we call a varim ivarim, which is also considered to be sort of a less pleasurable way of bathing. Essentially, you're just washing your hand, you're washing your face, you're washing your leg, you're washing your other leg, um, so on and so forth. So there's a spectrum of opinion as far as showering goes. Some people say showering is always acceptable, but I would recommend that even if you are going to shower, you should probably not make it as hot as you normally would to make it just a little bit less pleasurable. You have the extreme opinion on the other side that say that no kind of bathing is ever acceptable, and then you have sort of the people sort of float in the middle like me who kind of make do with showers and try to make them as less pleasurable an experience as possible, but still get the cleanliness aspect of modern Western life, that being met. Now, as we said before, when it comes to Shabbos, none of these prohibitions come into effect. And that when it comes to showering, the same thing is true when we deal with Erev Shabbos. And the Vilna Gaon was of the opinion, I know it's the Alter Zeda, right? Um, is of the opinion that that you can actually take a regular you can bathe regularly like you normally would on an Erev Shabbos, being that it's done for Shabbos. All right. Um, let me just you know, we'll come back to that only because this is another thing also that we have to discuss. All right, now, what about going to work during the 9 days? There are some authorities. Nobody holds like this, but there are some authorities who say that one is not allowed to go to work during the 9 days. Just have to sit and mope the entire time. But the Aruch HaShulchan says, well, how are you going to pay to eat the food that you need for that day? That doesn't seem to be a very reasonable position to take. There has to be you have to meet your obligations to mourn with your obligations to survive. And so therefore he says, yeah, you can go to work during the 9 days. That's not a problem. Also, with regards to making purchases, we say necessary purchases are permitted during the 9 days. So if you are purchasing anything for example, something that was broken, like your dishwasher broke, even though it's a high ticket item, or a car broke and you need to buy a new one, generally we say one should try to avoid making these kinds of purchases during the 9 days. If it's because you need the item, then you are allowed to buy it. You are allowed to make purchases for the purposes of a mitzvah, like for example, buying svarim. However, purchasing something for a simcha reason, for a happy reason, or for a celebratory reason, that is not allowed during the 9 days. So one, for example, should not buy wedding gifts. Um, One should not buy wedding gifts during the 9 days. And in general, anything that you do not need, you should not purchase during the 9 days. Only buy the things that you absolutely need at the time. Lawsuits should be avoided until, if at all possible, after Tisha B'av, and if and even then, if possible, should even be pushed off until after the entire month of Av has concluded. Similarly, one should try to get a continuance on all legal matters until after the entire month of Av. Now, also, I'm right now, thankfully, the show has agreed to make some repairs on our house, and these are repairs that we've been waiting for a very long time. The tiles in the washrooms were all cracked, and anytime someone would walk in there wearing their tights, not that I ever wear tights, I'm not speaking from firsthand experience. But whenever someone would walk in there with their tights would all get all shredded up on the tiles. So right now the show is in the throes of replacing the washroom tiles and doing some pretty extensive and in-depth work on all of the washrooms in our home. Would I be allowed to do that during the 9 days is really a question. So let's talk about it. So if I'm doing some kind of if I'm building a structure for a celebratory reason. So, for example, I'm building an addition to my home so that my married children have a place to live, or if I'm building a house for my married children, that would not be allowed during the 9 days. However, if to build an extension to the home because you just need more room for people to sleep, your family's growing, that would be permitted. That's considered to be like a building, just like purchasing. You're purchasing something for needs. Repairs to save from damage are always permissible. So if, for example, there's a leak in the roof, you can't say, "Hey, I'm not going to get the roof repaired," or I'm not going to fix this broken window during the 9 days. You need to have the window fixed because your air conditioning is running and you don't want the air to escape, or your heat's running, you don't want the heat to escape. It's causing you a loss. To keep things as they are, repairs are always permissible, and as such, even in our case over here right now, even though it's more than just simply repairing what's broken. They're actually expanding what's available. It would still, in terms of creating an additional shower stall, that would be considered to be something that is necessary. It's for a need as opposed to for a celebratory purpose, and would be permitted at this time. Planting for pleasure, like gardening, for example, should not be done during the 9 days. However, planting for gardening for upkeep, like pulling weeds or mowing a lawn, ideally you should have a non-Jew do it for you. You should have an employee do it during the 9 days. But if you can't find somebody to do it for you, then you can do it yourself. But to plant new trees, to plant new plants and things of that sort, to seed grass, that one should not do during the 9 days. All right, one of the things that people perhaps struggle with the most after not bathing over the course of 9 days is what to do about clothing. We're not allowed to make new clothing, purchase new clothing, or even wash clothing during the 9 days. These are the sorts of things that we do not do over this during this time. Now, this prohibition here is expanded. It's a much more serious one, especially as you compare it to the 3 weeks. Remember, if you recall, we said that during the 3 weeks, one is allowed to buy new clothing if it's the kind of clothing that you do not say a shehecheyanu on. So that would mean, for example, if a person buys a new shirt, generally a person does not say the bracha shehecheyanu on a new shirt. Therefore, one is allowed to buy a new shirt on during the 3 weeks. During the 9 days, we do not buy any kind of clothing at all, even if it does not require a shechianu bracha. That said, repairing clothing, like sewing a hem and things of that sort, are permitted during the 9 days. Um, One exception to this, in terms of purchasing clothing, is that there are some halachic authorities who say that, for example, let's imagine that Moors is having its annual 9th of Av, or like, so let's say 7th of Av, 80% off sale, and you need a new suit, and you know that if you don't buy it on this day, you're going to have to pay quite a bit of money, quite a bit more in order to purchase the suit. So if there's a major deal, and it will not be available after the 9 days, there are halachic authorities who say that you can make that purchase, even though generally we don't buy new clothes during this time, even if we're not going to wear it. Still, or do not wear it during the 9 days, still, when it comes to a situation like this where you stand to lose quite a bit of money if you don't take advantage of the sale, then there are halachic authorities who allow for it. And if you find yourself in this kind of a situation, please by all means come over and discuss it with me, and we can go over the parameters and see if that passes, if your circumstance or situation passes muster. Yeah, so again, getting back to washing clothing, one should not wash clothing or wear freshly laundered clothing during the 9 days. It is permissible to put clothes into a washing machine right before the 9 days and have the machine run during the 9 days, but you would not be allowed to wear that clothing. That said, while you can't put stuff into a washing machine during the 9 days, you can throw things into a dryer. Dryer doesn't do anything that is hygienic. It doesn't clean anything. And as a result, one can put stuff into a dryer during the 9 days, even though they can't do laundry, they can't wash clothing. Um, if one needs to do laundry during the 9 days, like for example, if somebody's going on a long trip and they're leaving immediately after Tisha B'av and they won't be able to wash clothing, there are some reasons and circumstances in which you can be lenient. So if you find yourself in that circumstance, come over and discuss it with me, and we'll talk about it. Dry cleaning is considered to be cleaning, and as such cannot be done during the 9 days. Now, spot cleaning, let's say you're eating your chicken and you drop a piece onto your jacket, or your pants or your skirt or whatever it is that you're wearing on your shirt, you are allowed to spot clean, especially if you fail to do so, it's going to leave a permanent stain. We do say spot cleaning is acceptable. A person is allowed to spot clean during the 9 days. Um, it's this idea of of not laundering clothing. It's not just about clothing that you wear that's subject to this exclusion. Also, sheets and towels and things of that sort should not be washed during this time. And ideally, somebody should not use freshly cleaned sheets in their bed. They should be slept in at least one night beforehand. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So these are items in general we say that a person should not wear, a person should not use, and that also means that a person should not shampoo their carpet. Just like they can't wash their sheets, they also shouldn't wash their carpets also for the same reason. We don't do this during the 9 days. But that said, if you have a guest coming to stay with you, you are allowed to give them fresh sheets to use. They don't have to use previously slept in sheets. There are some exceptions to this, and that is that while it's true we don't wear freshly cleaned clothing, we'll talk about how you prepare them. Some articles of clothing can be washed. And I mean, not that we don't wash them during the 9 days, but they can be worn. They can be worn even if they're clean. And those are the types of clothing that tends to get very dirty. So things that come in direct contact with your skin, like undershirts, underwear, socks, those are things you're allowed to wear. Um, you're allowed to wear even if they have been freshly washed, even if they have never been worn before. Um, Shirts also, if there's somebody's like a camp counselor and they're out in the sun all day and they're sweating up a storm, the shirt that you wear when you exercise also would fall into this. You're allowed to wear it, even if it hasn't been worn before, because these are items that get very dirty, um, and uh, and as such are not subject to this prohibition. Now, we said washing is prohibited, polishing is acceptable. So you are allowed to polish your shoes during the 9 days, especially if it's being done to honor Shabbos. Now, children, it's permissible to give children freshly clean clothing until that they're the age that they're mature enough not to get their clothing filthy. Now, so for each child is going to be different. So, right, so a child can wear freshly cleaned clothing. A child can wear freshly cleaned clothing as long as they're of the age that they're going to get their clothing very, very dirty. Once they reach an age where they're mature enough to keep their clothing clean, then they're subject to the same prohibition that everyone else is, and that they have to wear clothing that has been previously worn. Now, when it comes to Shabbos, for example, we said that when it comes to Shabbos, there are no rituals of mourning that are observed. Now, originally, that wasn't entirely the case. Originally, the custom was that people would not wear Shabbos clothing on the Shabbos that preceded Tisha B'av, a Shabbos that fell out during the 9 days. For example, you would not wear a suit. That was the original custom. However, the current custom comes from the Vilna Gaon. Again, it's the Alter Zeta. It's Eugene's Alter Zeta, anyways, not mine. The current custom is to wear Shabbos clothing and freshly washed clothing on Shabbos. And that is the widely accepted practice. We do wear clean clothing that's previously been washed. And However, we don't. One does not buy a new suit and wear it on this Shabbos, unless you have absolutely nothing else to wear. Then it's a different discussion. But if you have your druthers, you don't wear a brand new suit, but you can wear freshly cleaned clothes, and Shabbos clothes for that matter on a Shabbos that falls out during the 9 days. So it is permissible to wear clean clothes during the 9 days if they were pre-worn before the 9 days. So what does it mean for something to be pre-worn? The item is considered pre-worn if it has been worn for at least 5 minutes. So, for example, on this coming Friday, I will likely take out all of the shirts that I have, and I will take them off, and I will take off the shirt that I'm wearing and put on a new shirt, wear it for 5 minutes, do some Shabbos prep, take that shirt off and put on the next until I have worn all of the shirts that I'm going to be wearing over the course of the subsequent 9 days. One may intentionally prepare pre-worn garments by putting them on before the 9 days begin. Preferably, only one garment should be worn at a time. And you can do the exact same preparation for sheets and for towels as well. You just lie down on the freshly cleaned sheets for a couple minutes, and then then Bob's your uncle. They're good as gold. You can use them. If a person forgot to prepare enough clothing to last the 9 days, you can wear them on Shabbos. You can just sort of do the prep on Shabbos on the Shabbos. On Shabbos you're allowed to wear freshly clean clothing, so you can do it on that day. And in cases of great need, a person can take the clothing and put them on the floor. By putting the clothing on the floor, they're no longer considered clean, and as such, they're no longer considered clean, so you can wear them on the 9 days. And that is also a halachic eitzah. It's a halachic solution to a problem. If a person just doesn't feel inclined to wear all your clothing for 5 minutes at a time, just after you take them off as you're taking your shirts off the laundry line, just put them on the floor for a couple minutes, and then you maybe step on them once or twice, and then you pick them up, and then again, also Bob's your uncle, you're good as golden. And that's how we prepare for the 9 days. All right. We're going to stop here. Class has gone on for about 45 minutes to an hour. If you're here in person, you've been here an hour. If you're here online, you've been here about 45 minutes. That's when we started the recording. So we're going to stop here, and I will, at least I'll stop the recording, and I'm open to questions, comments, and rebuttals.